speak. I'll welcome him to the floor. Thank you. John Beesley.
Well, thank you very much indeed, and good evening, everybody. This is my annual appearance. I get invited here once a year, so normally it's on a Saturday morning, but you've reverted now to evenings, and I'm really pleased to come back because it gives an opportunity to give an update, I suppose, on our commitment to Boscombe, and then to get some questions from you, to talk about the things that really matter to you as residents of Boscombe. And I'm really pleased to have heard some of the updates around deprivation from CAT. And the reason I say that is because I made Boscombe one of my top 5 commitments around 4 years ago. And I always said it is going to take us at least 15 years to get where we want to get to. And it's heartening, I won't put it any more strongly than that, but it's heartening to see there's progress in an indices, or a range of indices, that straddle the whole of the southwest. So we're going in the right direction, and we just need to keep at it, because I've never pretended that the problems in Boscombe are small. They are huge, but they are being addressed, they are being tackled, and we're having some success. And I've always said, I think when I come to your forums, Harry, that it's really important that we all stay committed to the Boscombe priority, and we see this thing through. And so my commitment is something that I want to talk a little bit about, the commitment over the next 5 years. And I thought what I'd do would just to go through very quickly 1 or 2 issues around the targets and our state of the nation, if you like, right at the moment. As most of you know, I very rarely use slides. I was persuaded to use them this evening. I think it might be a one-off, actually, because I usually just speak off the cuff. But I think what this is telling us is that from the research that we've been doing, things are going the right way. So by talking to people and analysing those figures, we have got a small reduction in crime. We do have a situation where people feel slightly safer, according to that research. But perhaps more importantly, what we're doing is we're looking at how we can address some of those principal issues, especially around housing. We've always said that housing is absolutely at the heart of pulling Boscombe round, of regenerating the local community, because it then throws off all sorts of other advantages. And so one of the things that we wanted to do is to reduce the density of privately rented accommodation. Owner-occupiers, first-time buyers, those are the people we want to bring into Boscombe, and we want to make sure that we also tackle the issue of accommodation with support, and that we get those numbers down as well. And I'm very heartened by some of the work we heard of earlier on around what Tobias Elwood is trying to do to get some legislative changes to help us in that cause. Really important. We've recognised that actually for a long time, but the wheels of national government move extremely slowly. And so we have to position what we want in the right way to get the ear of ministers and get some changes in the legislation. Other targets.
Excuse me. What does CGNS mean on that last one?
Sorry, you have to turn it back. Can you go back?
No, sorry.
Yeah, in Churchill Gardens.
Churchill Gardens?
Yeah, there wasn't enough room on the
So
side.
we're supposed to know what that is then?
No, I should have mentioned it to you. But Churchill Gardens, Walpole Road, is part of Boscombe that we've been concentrating on, most particularly in terms of purchasing houses in multiple occupation and converting those into flats, particularly for families. So Churchill Gardens has been, if you like, the pivotal part, and a lot of what we're trying to do about regeneration is in that part of Boscombe. I can't do it all at once, so we've got a target where we're going to do it. And so other priority areas, street cleansing, well again, that is improving. terms of the target we set ourselves back in 2015. There seems to be a greater degree of satisfaction around that. We've still got problems, haven't we, with drugs and drug dealing. It started to come down, it's crept back up again. And that is probably one of the biggest challenges as a community that we face in Boscombe, is all the issues associated with drug dependency and alcohol. And that is something that is going to take us, actually, probably longer and is going to be harder to tackle, which is why we have to move on with everything else, so that we've got the right environment to help us, to help the police, who are really intent on getting that priority with a lower figure. The last one on there, health checks, because we heard earlier around health and how we've got to help people into that culture of improving health, therefore getting longer life expectancy and everything that goes with it, because that again feeds in to the index of deprivation. So they're all signals about how we're going to make a difference, and we need to do lots of different things and keep doing them well. Ma'am, you want to ask a question?
You're talking about the drug thing. I mean, you're asking for participation from, ordinary people, okay. But there have been issues where I've lived, and the man that the police have got, they've let go. They're caught, they've let go, they've got caught. I mean, where's the backup for reports and everything else?
Well, I can't comment on an individual issue, but
No.
what I think I'm trying to do is to set out the headline issues around crime, but most particularly around drugs. There'll be particular instances I can't comment on because I don't know, but I am certain, absolutely convinced, particularly through Operation Galaxy and all the other work that we're doing with the police, that if they've got the opportunity of taking somebody out who is part of the problem, then they will use every opportunity within the law to do it. Yes, so if there's a problem about continuity over one particular individual, there may be circumstances I know nothing about. And it would be wrong for me to
What are
comment.
they? I mean, it's procedures.
Well, it would be wrong for me to comment because I simply don't know who you're talking about or what the circumstances were. But the point is that it's going in the right direction, but it's probably the hardest part of the problem.
Oh, yes, I
And the
understand.
police fully recognise that and are doing everything they can to work alongside what the council are doing and the other agencies out there in the community. Yes, indeed. And I should have acknowledged, and I didn't, Martin Underhill is the Police and Crime Commissioner, who's with us this evening. Me being very careful what I say, but I've got to be clear about this. The work that we're doing with the police is a true partnership in the community. It works both ways. We can't do it without them. They can't do it without us. We've both got a common goal in turning Boscombe round, and thus far the police, I think, with the exercises we've been engaged in, have been a huge support. The themes for Boscombe, and some of the questions later on are going to come back to these, are around 6, housing, health, crime, young people, the local economy, and the local environment. And why those are important are because we need to get the right people engaged on those individual themes to make this work. That's what we've been doing, that's what we're going to carry on doing. So housing, absolutely central. Probably the most important one of the lot, because if we get the housing right, so much else flows from it. Health, well, we've heard a bit about that with the statistics, and it's self-evident, isn't it, that in terms of lifestyle, health is a major part of determining that. Crime, absolutely, we've got to get crime way down, particularly in that area of drugs and the other antisocial behaviour issues that come from it. We've got to remember that if we are changing the demographic of Boscombe, young people are going to become more of the solution if we get more families back into Boscombe. The local economy, well, that's something that, certainly in my role with the council, I concentrate on as much as anything else, because the local economy is absolutely key to jobs, to prosperity, to well-being, to everything we're trying to achieve, and of course the local environment. And that's where the council have put quite a lot of its money so far, about improving the environment for the long term. No quick fixes, let's not do it on the cheap, let's do it properly. Boscombe deserves it to be done properly, and to do what we need to do so that it lasts. So we don't have to come back and make good in a couple of years' time. So I know we've had a bit of criticism because we can't do all of it all at once, but there is a strategy there about doing what we can to the best of what we can afford to do and making sure that we do it as well as possible. And so the local environment is absolutely essential. That's the way to get people back into Boscombe, spending money, back into Boscombe, setting up businesses, providing jobs. That's how we get money spent on housing and invested in housing, because the environment generally is left to the local authority, and Boscombe is an area where we've been prioritising that investment, and we'll carry on doing it. So, what have we got so far? We've since we started Boscombe being a priority for me and for the administration, £5.4 million invested in housing. So that's houses in multiple occupation, Churchill Gardens, Walpole Road. That's the money that we're putting into shared ownership in Palmerston Road. It's the other things that we're doing in housing locally. That's what we've done already. Already looking at that, a 39% reduction in accommodation with support, really important, really important. Palmerston Road scheme I've talked about. Churchill Gardens management plan. So it isn't just about us converting properties in Churchill Gardens, it's about getting in place a proper management plan to bring the whole area back up again. Huge potential, isn't there? It used to be, years and years ago, one of the best parts of Bournemouth, and it can be again. We've recognised that, the council have been putting money into it, and the management plan will help us to deliver the long-term improvements that we're looking for. Outset. Now, Outset is something which my colleague Jane Kelly is very well engaged with. And Outset is one of the ways in which we get start-up businesses off the ground, only employing maybe 1 or 2 people to start with. But Outset is there to help us to invest in the local community and improve the economy. And we see there 81 individuals, 22 businesses, and we have just, as a council, made a commitment with some bridging funding of, I think, 35,000 only a couple of weeks ago, before they get more grant funding, to ensure that they can keep doing what they're doing. You all know how scarce resources are for councils and all the public services. We found another 35,000 to make sure that happened. So that's really important. Why did we do it? We did it because Outset concentrate their work on the Boscombe area, both Boscombe East and Boscombe West through Folkestone. And we thought that that was really important that we kept doing it, because if we take it away, we'll lose it forever. Down there at the bottom, Kings Park play area was in consultation with the children who come to this school. All right, so it isn't the council dreaming something up. Kings Park play area is going to be something which will demonstrate investment locally for young people, and it's being done in conjunction with the people who are at this school. That makes sense. The precinct and the community support officers, jointly funded by the council, by the police, and by Bournemouth 2026. And again, it's a joint effort about making a difference in the long term. Operation Galaxy, well, that is, if you like, the bedrock of what we're trying to do in Boscombe. It's what's delivering through all these different agencies, and most particularly targeting its resources on houses of multiple occupation here in Boscombe. We've done other things which again, you see there, Warner Homes, Live Well Dorset, their health issues which again will help us. The Cotton Exchange, that's the old Argos building. and that now houses the police, the regeneration team, and youth services. So again, bringing back into the heart of Boscombe, in the right part of Boscombe, those services, so they've got visibility and they get good use. So again, the council investing alongside the police very substantial resources. Now I've got a question I've been asked about it, so I'll keep the figures for that question when I come to it later. The neighbourhood plan and the community economic development plan. Well, we heard earlier, didn't we, Chairman, what you're going to be doing, and I welcome the work that you're going to be doing with the council, who are supporting both of those, because together I think we can achieve so much more than we can separately, and I'm very pleased that you're going to be devoting your concentration on that. I just hope that you found a successor to run this forum, because the forum is equally important as well. So where does that take us? And an ongoing commitment. Well, I just wanted to say to you, before I take questions, an ongoing commitment, that's easy to say, isn't it? I hope I've demonstrated, since we made Boscombe one of the top 5 priorities of this council about 4 years ago, that we have actually delivered already on that commitment, not just delivered in terms of putting money and resource and people into it, but by delivering in terms of outputs and results. And we're doing this and continuing to do it at a time when resource has never been tighter. And just to put that into some sort of context, bear in mind that Bournemouth Council, like many unitary authorities, we've already lost 50% of our government grant. We've got another slug coming out next year and the following year. Huge amounts coming out. The commitments that we are statutorily obliged to deliver on, adult and children's social care, take 75% of our net budget, which leaves us 25% for everything else that residents expect from their council. And within that 25%, the commitment to Boscombe, the ongoing commitment, is still there. It's still as rock solid as it was before. And it's a commitment that not just I, but my colleagues, your ward councillors, very pleased to see 5 of your 6 ward councillors here this evening, their commitment is absolute as well. As long as I am leader and as long as everything else remains as stable as it is at the moment, that commitment is ongoing. And I really want to see us succeed. I want to see Boscombe get to where I know it can get back to. And if we can do it quicker than 15 years, that's great. But let's not fool ourselves, there's still an awfully long way to go. But with your help, your support, and that of not only the local community, but your ward councillors and the council, I'm convinced, together with the other agencies who are crucial in this, most particularly the police, I'm convinced that we can get there, Chairman. And I look forward to being a part of it and reporting on progress again in 12 months' time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Beesley. Okay, well, we've had submitted questions. I'll alternate between the questions we've submitted and the questions from the floor. So I'll start off with a question that came from Popestown Forum. We have, as Boscombe Forum, been going to meetings with Popestown Forum. They've been trying to get the lifts reinstated there. So the question was, at a recent meeting of the Popestown Station Action Group, Tobias Elwood underlined the importance of the station, importance of the station being an LEP approved project. That's a local enterprise partnership, so as to attract government funding for the much needed installation of lifts. Would this be something that you would be willing to support and take forward to action?
Well, I am obviously willing to support it. I signed the petition, actually. I was one of the very first people to do so, however long ago. That was 18 months ago, maybe. I don't believe, though, it's quite as simple as that. Funding never is it? If it were, we'd get everything done we want. The Local Enterprise Partnership, and I'm a board member, has its own priorities set in conjunction with government. And I can't buck the trend effectively by saying I think we should have money put into this, because I think what is more likely to happen is the pressure will need to be applied and continue to be applied to the railway management, be that Network Rail or be that South West Trains when the franchise is given. Whatever it is, we need to keep that pressure up. Now, if there is an opportunity within one of the funding streams for what are called growth deals that affect particularly train transport, then yes, of course, it will come right up the agenda. But in terms of funding through growth deal bids at the moment, we've been really successful at this end of the county, and I hope will continue to be, but most of that money has gone into the A338, the Wessex Way up to Cooper-Dean, and the investment that's going to take place for a new junction for the hospital. Those have been our priorities because that's where the money was awarded, and then it was about opening up the industrial land around the airport. And you take what you can from government, so whatever fits the criteria, you bid for it, and if you're successful, then you get on and spend it. But I will, obviously, at any opportunity, bring that forward. I suggest strongly that the pressure is kept up, and also that you continue to remind Tobias, I don't expect Elise to be reminded, that if he is able to lobby the Minister for any additional funding that may become available, so disability access springs to mind, then just keep on reminding him that this is a priority for Folkestone.
Okay, thank you very much. If I could take a question from the floor.
During your presentation, you alluded to HMOs being something dangerous or poisonous or not necessary. As I used to run HMOs in Kent, where they were licensed and policed properly by the local authority. They provide a way off the street under a roof. Stop putting them down and start policing them and supporting the people that are running them. Your official figure is 47 rough sleepers in the Bournemouth area. If you can spare a half an hour after this meeting, I'll take you and show you 50 without leaving Boscombe. The only way off the street initially is through an HMO. Stop treating them as if there's something wrong and start making the owners of them do the right job.
Well, thank you for that. You raised a number of points there. And I'll take them in no particular order. I don't think I used the language that you described about HMOs. That may be, no, but let me finish. I didn't interrupt you, so just give me the courtesy of that. I didn't use that language because there is a strategy that lies behind why we're doing what we're doing. I don't think we've ever said we don't want any HMOs in Boscombe, but we have to recognise that housing is at the very core of many of the problems in Boscombe, and we started off in a position with far too many HMOs, far more in terms of concentration than anywhere else, not only in the borough, but in most places in the southwest. And it's clear that that is part of the problem, and I think everybody has agreed that what the council's trying to do is, if you like, at two levels. The inspection regime that you referred to is something that has been underway in this town, but most particularly in Boscombe now for the last 3 years, 4 years, something like that, and it has been draconian. There have been over 1,000 inspections. Landlords have been required to do the things they've been asked to do, or face prosecution. We have been very robust. So let nobody say that we haven't been doing that, because we have. But the problem in Boston has been far bigger than it is elsewhere. And so therefore we needed to do two things. We needed to deal with it in terms of inspection and enforcement, but we also needed to get the numbers down. And where there were opportunities, we needed to go in, buy and convert. Because it's all very well retaining the number of HMOs, but if the problem is that it means that we end up with a lack of families, for example, in Boscombe. We will never get the mix in Boscombe that we need to achieve all of the other outputs that we're looking for. And that's why we've been doing what we've been doing. Now, over time, we will get further into that, and we hopefully will get to a point of balance. In terms of rough sweeping and homelessness, the lady sitting in front of you knows more about that subject than I ever will. And Kelly is one of our principal officers dealing with the homelessness issues and understanding our policy of trying to get people out of that cycle of homelessness if that is what they agree they want to do. But there are many who don't, and there are other problems associated with it. I'm very proud actually of our homelessness team and what they try to do and how hard they work at trying to break that cycle. But it is a never-ending task, and most of the people involved do not have a Bournemouth connection.
No.
And that, of its own, is a big problem.
But most of them don't have connection to anywhere else either. And once you establish that, Bournemouth Borough Council, not you personally, but Bournemouth Borough Council has the ability to grant them local connection. Once they've established they have no local connection to anywhere else. That is not happening in Bournemouth. No, it's not, is it?
No, it isn't.
But you have a duty of care to people that you're not exercising.
Well, can I tell you why it's not happening? Because somebody's got to pay for it. And who has to pay for it is the local council taxpayer. They pay for the service, they pay for everything that we do. And what we need to do, and what we do, is address our first principal priority around homelessness, which is those with a local connection, together with those who are ex-services over the last 5 years. And we do that, and we do it really, really well. But if we make it attractive, human nature being human nature, Bournemouth, in general, becomes a good place for people to be decanted to by other local authorities for one reason or another, and lots of other reasons. And that isn't something I want to encourage, because council taxpayers will have to pay for it at a time when, as I told you earlier, we are absolutely struggling financially with the amount of money that we've already had taken away by government. And effectively, what we're doing is adding to the bill. And we can't sustain that. We simply can't do it without cutting other services.
And does that bill not increase? For the fact we have people living on the street who, because they have no local connection, cannot register health services, cannot do an awful lot of things. They don't try. It happens. You know, I spent all day today talking to people in the university about the same problem. You, as a council, not you as an individual, but you as a council, have the ability to, once establishing that someone does not have a local connection, give them local connection. That then gives them access to various services that are not funded by the council, funded by the government, but you have the, right, so addiction services. Without local connection, you cannot access addiction services.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I understand why
But
you're
you,
saying
as a council, have the ability to provide. I agree that you have to establish whether someone has local connection. When you establish the fact that somebody does not have local connection anywhere, I mean, the policy is nationally, look at it, you establish local connection to somebody, you give them one-way train ticket and they go.
and we do.
When someone has no local connection anywhere, you have anywhere. You right or the ability to grant any local connection. Bournemouth Borough Council does not do it. Bournemouth Borough Council street services do try very hard not to even connect. Try very hard not to even connect with someone. And I'm talking to someone who was homeless.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry I'm going to give you a message. I'm sorry, but there's no point in this forum or speaking to anybody else about how it is and what the truth is. The fact is, we won't be doing that. We won't be doing that now, we won't be doing it in the future. It may sound very hard, but my responsibility But my responsibility in law is to safeguard the best interests of local residents, and local residents and those with a local connection are the people that we concentrate on. And I just don't have the resources for anymore. And even if I did, I don't believe that what I don't believe that council to be doing. And I know that may not sound.
So people start dying in the
Well, that's not what I was saying, and let's not be amazed about it, because our owners in this team will do everything they can to prevent that happening, and their engagement with people is really at the full extent you can ever expect. Some people will not engage. And most of the clients around those people. I'm sorry you're not getting the answer you want from me. I'm sorry not no point me standing up here and trying to tell you what you want to hear. I'm going to tell you how it is.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for that. There is a growing.
I'm query on what these chaps, maybe either one or both could define, maybe either one or both could define local connection, but I'm not sure what it means.
Can I ask Kelly to do it?
So, hello, I'm Kelly Ansell, and I'm housing Boscombe Regeneration. I'm working in the housing team. So local connection in terms of access to services for people who may work maybe services who are sleeping would be people who lived in the area for 6 out of the last 12 months. So, and that's so 3 out of the last 5 is the homelessness legislation. It ultimately, when it comes down to immediate access to services, and that comes crisis hours, 6 out of the last 5.
6 out of the last 12 months. 6 out of the last 12 months. Okay, I think we've covered this subject now. I mean, there is a growing problem with homelessness. Policies helping that, and the police are quite right. They're not going to criminalise homelessness. So I think that's something that will have to be tackled. I think that's something growing in Boscombe, Southbourne, saying the same thing as in Morehouse. So I think that's something that will be being tackled in the future. Goes to one of the submitted questions now. The council recently contracted a creative consultant to supervise a report regarding building a long-term arts and culture plan for the whole of Bournemouth. Will the council's long-term strategy for arts and culture reflect Bournemouth's growing position as one of the UK's top destinations? I think this is recognising the Arts Council as seen as we've neglected our arts infrastructure.
The short answer is yes, absolutely. I think we've recognised now for quite some time the importance of the arts in lots of different ways. I just refer to the Arts Festival, Arts by the Sea, which takes place in the autumn. It's co-funded by the Arts Council, so they must think, given that they match the funding, they must think that we've got something really worth doing, because their resource is very, very tight these days. And they have recently confirmed to us their commitment ongoing. So we're getting that bit right. Certainly in terms of the arts, one of the easiest pieces of expenditure to drop during the period of austerity would be anything arts related. But I think that would be greatly to the detriment of Bournemouth, for its residents, certainly for its visitors, its tourism economy, and indeed as a destination recognised throughout the country for lots of different reasons, not least the Bournemouth Symphony Orchestra as an example. I think it's absolutely essential that arts strategy is something we keep up to date, which we replenish and we resource as far as we possibly can, but also, of course, draw in funding from the private sector and from better access as well. And I hope that across the town, wherever it's possible, we can actually replicate that as super local social services. And that's what we're trying to do.
Okay, thank you for that. Can I take another question?
My name is Mark and I live in Boscombe, a local resident. Just like to say thank you for coming. congratulate our councillors that live here and from there, taking care of it and this work and our councillors. So I always think it's but I just my comment would be, I was walking earlier in the precinct and I noticed the lanterns Chinese New Year. And I'm just wondering, it's interesting, but I've never understood why we're celebrating the Chinese New Year. But is there any way we could sort of work with the local community that lives in Boscombe, basically the Polish community and the Portuguese community, and get them involved, really involved, because looking around, I can't see anybody here from the Polish community or the Portuguese community. I think it's very, very important to get them to work as part of the community and make improvements as well. Any comments on that?
I completely agree with you. The Chinese New Year doesn't cost all the council or its council taxpayers any money. It's the Chinese community who do it, and they're very welcome, and we encourage them, and they do things around the town. So that's really, really good. Other communities do other things here as well, of course, don't they? So festivals throughout the year. The Portuguese community, I'm a councillor, like my colleagues, my ward is Westbourne and Westcliff, and Westcliff has a very large Portuguese community, historically, probably 3 or 4 generations now, so they're fairly active in my neck of the woods, and if any village or any other country want to take anyone, more than sure that local councillors and our officers will do everything they can to encourage it. We've got their money, we all know that, but quite often, as with the Chinese New Year, there are other ways of raising that money and celebrating something in this country that binds the rest of that community together. And that actually, the cohesive quality of that, particularly in somewhere like Boston, is really, really important. I don't underrate that at all. And so if you want to be in touch, I'm sure that Jane Kelly would be a good person to talk to afterwards, and I'm sure she'll try and take something forward.
I would also say, as the forum, we've been trying to reach out to the various different community groups.
I would also say, as the forum, we've been
very supportive council that joined the forum,
groups,
and myself, Senka, comes regularly. We've been in contact with the Chinese community over the Chinese New Year celebration. Also over the neighbourhood plan, it's very much, because Boscombe West has 30%. Also over the neighbourhood plan, it's very much Boscombe West different cultural groups, 24, I think 26 different cultural groups. It's very important, deeply as a neighbourhood plan, as we reach out to those groups. I think we'll see a lot of events, trying to bring people out and engage them with their local areas, and I think that'll be very beneficial. So it's something that we do as a priority with their local areas.
Just add, actually, there is something happening here in Boston. I think it's in the precinct on Saturday. There is the 30th of January and the 31st of January, so the weekend at the end of this month, which is, I think, aligned to the Chinese New Year, but it's particularly a ceremony that they're doing. I haven't got all the details, so I'm coming to it, and I believe the mayor's actually put in a room.
That's safe, that's impossible. There is a Chinese community in Boscombe. Yeah. The Polish and the Portuguese communities are larger.
There is a Chinese community in Boscombe. Yeah. The Polish and the Portuguese communities are
people. Okay, if I go on to another one of the submitted questions. This is regarding the old school house.
If I go on to another one of the submitted questions.
What was the criteria for the Recreate project for the old schoolhouse, and have the criteria been met?
What was the criteria for the Recreate project for the old schoolhouse, and have
I think probably in a more diverse way than most people appreciate it would be the case. So what we've been doing is looking at the facilities for particularly small start-ups and creative industries. It's a growing part of our local economy. So anything to do with digital or creative industries is something that we are putting a lot of effort into, because it is a growth industry, and Bournemouth in general is becoming recognised centre throughout the country. So really important that we do at the old schoolhouse what we planned to do, which was to help give the creative industries a bit of a lift, and that is working and working well. But alongside that, to try and use it for other community activities. So be that meetings, be that dance, be that theatre, many of them actually arts related one way or another, but bring other use as well. And the combination of that is working. It's taking a bit of time, yes, but certainly it fulfills the criteria laid down by Recreate. And that's generally European funding, which we were fortunate enough to manage to attract. So going well, more to do, but in the right direction. Going well, more to do. Well, the creative industries, of course, why is Bournemouth a centre? Well, it's because of the huge amount of work, particularly post-grad work, that comes out of both universities, both Bournemouth University and Arts University Bournemouth. And the creative is not just about film and animation, although that's where they really are at the top of the tree worldwide. And that's surprising to most people, but they have a wonderful track record. I've had privilege of going around on a couple of occasions now and actually seeing the work, seeing how they do it and meeting the students. But we have something really, really important happening at those two universities. But what happens when they leave? So the post-grad part of it is about making sure that we get those people established in the creative and digital as well to form businesses, employ people, get growth in the local economy. And who are we competing against? Well, we're competing in this country against Soho, London, Brighton and Bristol predominantly. But Bournemouth gets mentioned more and more as one of the most upcoming places in the country. And so we want to make sure that works all and more.
So the old schoolhouse has been transferred to Bournemouth 2026 run. Will that be keeping it in the same vein as what it is doing?
Yes, absolutely. That's our intention, always has been, and seems to work really well. I think it's a great that's taking place there.
Yeah, we're just using the meeting.
And I've been there for a meeting with you in the past as well. I think it's doing really well.
Yeah, we can take a question.
Can I take a question?
Ms. Beesley, I recognise the ongoing work with the council attempts to improve the housing quality, particularly in Boscombe West, and I support that. I have a sort of slightly coming at the housing issue from a slightly different angle. I'm lucky enough to be a householder, having worked 3 jobs to get a deposit, but anyway, as a householder in Boscombe East, I am noticing that in 15 years, I've known Boscombe for nearly 30 years. I've been resident in the current property for about 14, 15 years. So it's a fair overview. The number of properties that have been taken down and multiple flats put up has increased dramatically. There's some very lovely parts of architecture have been lost. The number of existing properties, I'm seeing now a trend to division of existing properties rather than new builds, so I see this change in planning regulations. But you mentioned rightly about houses for families and attracting and supporting families. Do you realise that these flats and units, they're literally nothing more than glorified exits? They're not fit for families. There's no parking, there's no gardens, and I wonder if the council is looking at this in terms of an overall planning strategy, and also, are we not setting up Boscombe East to be the new Boscombe West in 30 years' time, with all these tiny little units that will be deteriorating by then?
Thank
Thank you.
Well, I'll give you an emphatic no to that, but I understand what lies behind your question. Of course, the local authority, the local planning authority, can only determine applications within planning law, and that it is something that is at arm's length from the rest of the council for obvious statutory reasons. And yes, I mean, we can all point to some developments that we don't like for one reason or another, but if they've got a consent and if they're built out, then that's what's happened. But what we're trying to do is to look at all the different types, all the different tenures of housing, and try to bring up the ones that we think are going to help to improve Boscombe, be it Boscombe West or Boscombe East. So, the ones... well, I'm coming to that. The ones that are prioritised, certainly in my mind and in the minds of colleagues, is about what do we do to try and help first-time buyers get onto the housing ladder. It's never been more difficult. It's never been more important. We've been trying to do this in Bournemouth for some time. So, Gladstone News is an example of that. Community Land Trust is about trying to get local people into their own homes and give them a foot on the bottom of the property ladder. Community Land Trust not rolled out all that much in this country. Interestingly, the first ones that worth the travels, just down the coast. We've done it successfully with Gladstone News. Shared ownership, we're doing in Palmerston Road, and we will be doing others. We are trying to make sure with the money that the council's spending, council taxpayers' money, that we're looking at what we can do for families, which has been about the conversion of HMOs, but we're also looking at what's happening further down in Boscombe and Boscombe East, and certainly it's been an issue for the Folkestone Forum. I get all the emails, so I know, and I go to Folkestone Forum once a year, and we'll be doing so again very soon. But the mixture of tenures means that the council can't control all of them. And so we all know that there are developers who develop property for rent, and some of those are very big landlords and some of them are much smaller. But we can't necessarily control everything because we haven't got the powers to do so. You know, there's no point trying to control something that you haven't got the legal powers to do. And we're doing everything we can to make sure that we get that mixture of tenures and we get that fresh approach to the new people who are coming into the area, particularly around young couples and families, because that's what we are missing for the longer term. And that's how we will regenerate the heart of Boscombe, I believe. Slow progress, yes. Minimum 15-year timescale. Minimum 15 years. And, you know, I don't apologise for that. I prefer to do it right in 15 years than to have a quick stab at it for a couple of years and then say, no, it's too difficult or it's too big a problem. It will take time.
Within the confines of existing planning law, are you saying the council are aware that we're losing, you know, we're losing architecture, we're losing buildings, and the shift of, I mean, there's perfectly good planning laws, okay, maybe people can't afford them at the minute, but they're being changed as fences, basically, which is exactly what you're trying to get away from on the other side. It seems nonsense.
Well, I have to say there's quite a bit of government policy around housing and around planning that don't help us. And some of that is policy that's been introduced in the last year or two. And I will always stick up for the local authority in the interests of local people, even if that means I'm in conflict with government policy, because some of what's coming through has been very unhelpful. I don't pretend otherwise. So something called permitted development, you may have heard of. The government relaxed permitted development in a number of areas 2 years or so ago, and have decided to continue that relaxation. And in one particular area of that relaxation, but only one of a number, I have my biggest concerns, and that is that permitted development is allowed from offices into residential. And that means it hardly touches the local planning authority in the process. And a lot of what is happening in certain parts of Bournemouth is around office into residential and into what I think is inappropriate residential for the long term. I think what you're talking about is new build, but again, government... well, absolutely, but quite often we're not helped by planning inspectors who will overturn refusals locally. But believe me, local planning authority, I'm speaking as a former chairman of planning, so you know, I was fighting these same battles myself when I was chairman. We will be doing everything we can to prevent that inappropriate development where the law supports us. Recognise the problem completely.
I don't know, I think I'll say in the shops selling into housing as well, I think it's a problem, particularly, well, in Boscombe. But the neighbourhood plan, some of those things we've already discussed have been brought up, size of dwellings, loss of heritage, those are all things that the neighbourhood plan can solve. We can make the planning law much more robust, and we can do things that is completely opposite to what central government says.
Could I turn to what you said a moment ago? You were talking about shops, and you were talking mainly shops, I think, in sort of the Folkestone area. And a lot of the work that people like Pam Britton and the local ward councillors have been doing in Boscombe East. And I know she sent me all her emails, yes, so you'll know too. And I'm very supportive of what she's trying to do. It's expensive if we do it, but if we can make sure that planners and enforcement put on pressure, and we put pressure on those landlords to do what they need to be doing, again, it's a long haul, but I think it's worth it.
Is this what you mean by the robust, whatever it is, for the landlords do what they do? You know, the stuff is up to tackle. But this is in cohesion with the police.
No, this is I think separate. This is about new build or conversion of property.
Yes.
What I was talking about earlier in terms of enforcement was around standards of existing residential.
Yeah, I understand that. Well, what I'm asking is, just to go back, I'm sorry, I'm detracting from what you're talking about, is you're talking about the relationship, a good relationship that you need with the police, with Mr. Kusher, etc., to do this robust enforcing. Is that what you're saying?
Well, the police have a role to play in that, yes. But what I was talking about in terms of our inspection, those are basically, in that context, our property inspections about the standard of accommodation being to an acceptable level, and making sure that if it isn't, that landlords bring it up.
For support from the police to enforce whatever it is.
No, on that side, that's something that we do. The police enforcement is around a whole bunch of other antisocial behavioural issues or indeed criminal activity.
Right. That's what you're talking about with the relationship.
It's quite simple.
Okay. Yeah, so the neighbourhood plan, that'd be something where people in Boscombe can really tackle those problems you're talking about. We could even put a minimum size for housing. That's not impossible. If people wanted that in Boscombe, that could become part of the policy. It needs a consensus because it goes to referendum. So if people have that consensus, then what we will end up with is a very thick document of planning law, which hopefully will see Boscombe become something that we who live here want to happen. Okay, I'll take the next question submitted. Will the leader provide guarantees that the role of community and neighbourhood forums will be planned into the strategy for the super council, or the proposed super council?
Time doesn't permit me to go through what the proposal is, but what I hope and expect is that we end up in a position, for lots of reasons, not least the future of local government and the delivery of the highest quality services that we can provide, is a new unitary authority for South East Dorset, for the urban area of Bournemouth, Poole, Christchurch, probably extending up as far as Ferndale. And so it's about 450 to 500,000 people. If that happens, then of course there are an awful lot of things which people use and expect to continue using, and forums of course, are a way of community engagement and involvement. And certainly, from my perspective, I would see that continuing. The last thing I would want would be to see the termination of the forums in Bournemouth, because they actually are right the way across the town. They are very vibrant. I get invited to virtually all of them, not all of them actually, but virtually all of them, and I attend at least once a year each of those that I'm invited to. And I see at first hand the value that they bring. So it isn't just about everybody talking and discussing issues, it's about the actions that come out, it's about working with councillors, it's about working with the council to deliver those changes or improvements or dealing with the issues, and the council, in Bournemouth's case, put in a little bit of resource to help make sure that it oils the wheels to make it happen. Now, the detail of what happens in Poole or Christchurch or in East Dorset, I'm not wholly aware of, although there's been a little bit of publicity about Poole, I think, recently. But certainly from the point of view of Bournemouth, I would see things continuing very much as they do at the moment.
Yeah, I think the way I see it, I mean, things did get bigger in terms of the size of the council in the area. Forums and I would say things like neighbourhood plans, areas, the localism legislation allows communities to do a lot for themselves, even to run services. You know, they can bid for services, they can buy properties, things like that. So they can actually do things very locally. You know, so I think in terms of that way, that engagement, especially in the early stages of building the large thing, I think the very small things should at least taken on board, and some of those ideas, you know, but taken on early on rather than at a later stage.
Well, just to give you an example, I think one unitary for South East Dorset would have one local planning authority. That would make sense to me. However, in terms of planning decisions, I would see a structure which involved local ward councillors in different parts of that conurbation, and the determination of planning applications being a little bit more local than just in one place for the whole of those 500,000 people. That's pretty easily manageable, actually, within a much bigger structure. And so you're right, that localism and where it matters to local people, how you deal with things in their own community is something to make this whole thing work would be absolutely vital, because otherwise it would just be one amorphous body that really nobody could get to grips with, and that wouldn't be good enough.
Okay, thank you. Can I take another question from the floor?
It's a bit of a hodgepodge, actually. You want Bournemouth to be an attractive place to come to. The station in Bournemouth is the filthiest station I've ever seen with the rubbish there. I've complained countless times in that wet row. I would like to see that change. I'm glad the Scottish music has stopped. I thought it had last week, but it was still playing. I've complained. I hope that's stopped now. Looking into Boscombe itself, the precinct is still dangerous as regards trip hazards. Every now and there's another hole in the precinct. If you shop outside, go to Sainsbury's, you find beggars who are not beggars, or people without money, homeless, who are living above the library, sitting waiting by your ticket and saying, "Got spare change, miss?" And I did it for a while, didn't I don't anymore. You can't move them because it is council land, you can't move them. You go to Sainsbury's, a man walks by, he's nicked a pint of milk and walks past the till, and Sainsbury's says, well then another one goes, and then the legged man goes out the other door. And there's a somebody out there with a bicycle, taking the leg man off, all the beef, whatever it is. It's just a feeling of being intimidated. These are little things that could be sorted, especially outside Sainsbury's. At his council land, can something be done to stop the begging that's going on there? Thank you.
Well, as far as I'm aware, there is work in hand to address those issues, and I think I alluded to it earlier on. I certainly know that the ward councillors are very engaged in that. Am I right? Obviously, Boscombe West Ward, which is where you're talking about, I think the engagement couldn't be greater. But yes, there is more to do. There is more to do. I know they are. I know that they are. They make a difference to the quality of life. I experience intimidation in other parts of Bournemouth and other parts of the country. In some other parts of the country, very, very much greater than you have ever experienced down here, I have to say. But nevertheless, there is still a lot of room for improvement. The job is not complete by any means at all. In terms of the station, we have invested through Three Towns Travel, but it's a Bournemouth Council non-initiative but funded by government, a huge amount of money in the travel interchange area. And I think that part of it looks good. The station, through Network Rail, are doing some work later this year on the frontage to that, on the station. And you know, the fabric of the station inside, particularly the roof, is pretty good. David Atkinson, former MP for Bournemouth East, was the man who made that happen, and a tribute to him for doing so. But the way they run it, the way they manage it, is far from satisfactory, and you are one of a number of people, including the council, who regularly complain about the amount of litter and rubbish, and will carry on doing so. But we're trying to get them to finish the job off on their bit of the travel interchange, and I'm confident from the conversation I had last week that that's what's going to happen.
Okay, and another one here, this is from a person, a part-time worker, with parking charges, which have gone up recently. Reads a little bit like a maths question, so... As a part-time worker who sometimes works up to 7 hours in a day, I was able to pay £3.50 in Boscombe for parking. Now, however, there is no other option than paying for 24 hours, which has been raised from £4 to £5. A parent now working 6 hours to fit with school hours now has to pay an extra £7.50 per week, whereas full-time worker will have an extra £5 per week. This increase places a further financial burden for people like me. Can the leader provide a solution where workers like me are not out of pocket?
Well, I don't know that I can provide a solution, I can provide an explanation. Car parking charges are always a highly emotive issue, aren't they? And what we've tried to do for the last 6 years, until earlier this year, we've frozen car parking charges in almost every case across the borough for 6 years. We put in a very small increase, I think it's 10p at the beginning of the year, and then we had a full review towards the end of the year. And the simple truth is that we need the money. Money from car parking has to be reinvested in the service, and unless we do that, the standards will continue to deteriorate. So we do need that income, and having frozen for that long period of time, you've got to put your charges up sometime. If you don't, you just erode the budget completely. I think that we still offer very good value for money. I haven't got in my own mind the actual Boscombe charges, but I took you to the town centre where you can purchase 2 hours in a shopper's car park for £1.50. It's gone up from £1, I appreciate that, but we brought the charges down several years ago in order to get the volume, to get the occupancy up, and you can have 4 hours for £3.50, I think. And then go and compare that to a private sector NCP car park, where I think you'll find the 2 hours cost you £4 and the 4 hours cost you £8. That's the market rate, is the private sector one. And that market rate is more than double what we're now charging on the increased rates. So I think they still offer pretty good value. And actually, although I understand what lies behind the question for somebody who's travelling to and from work, a couple of points. One is we've invested very heavily in our public transport infrastructure, particularly buses and the new routes and all the rest of it. And Boscombe is right on that route. So people really, if they can, should be trying to use public transport much more than they have been. And in terms of the cost of running a car, most people in this room probably would understand that those costs compared to those parking charges are probably not going up anywhere near as much as the other costs have done over the last few years. And so that's an explanation. I can't offer a satisfactory solution to the person who asked the question. We won't be changing that. We won't be changing those charges because we simply can't afford to. We have to make sure that this financial juggling act works for everybody as best we can. And there are always going to be people who are better off or worse off as a result.
I'll just make the point that we're trying to revitalise our shopping areas, our town centre shopping areas. The raising the parking charges, often the comment is more people then go to Castle Point where parking's free, or Southbourne where they can park on the high street at no charge. And we've got places like Boscombe where you actually have to use a car park because it's a pedestrianised area. Maybe we're actually being detrimental to our own efforts to economically regenerate our shopping areas.
Yes, but I mean, we have to be realistic as well. I mean, we're ploughing in a lot of money into Boscombe and have done over these last 4 years. Disproportionately high to anywhere else in the borough for the reasons I've explained. It's the right thing to do. But at the same time, we still got to look at revenue streams as well across the whole of the borough. And we have to look at them in comparison to other places. I often get Castle Point cited because it's free of charge. But you know, ultimately that doesn't mean that we have to be free of charge across the borough. Bournemouth competes very, very well with almost everywhere else along the South Coast in terms of car parking charges, particularly in central locations, such as the middle of Boscombe, such as the middle of Bournemouth. And if we don't do that, we're going to have to raise other charges disproportionately, and that isn't fair either. But we did our best with it. Frozen for 6 years. You know, there aren't many places can say that. We froze council tax bills for 5 years in a row. You know, we can't forever freeze and expect services to be retained when we're losing so much money from government. I don't want to do it. Of course I don't. Wouldn't it be easy? Wouldn't it be popular to say, no, I'll change law and we'll put prices back down? But the books don't balance, and if the books don't balance, what happens is that everything else deteriorates. It's a hard game out there, but we try to do what we think is fair.
Okay, thank you. Let's take a question to the floor.
Yeah, hi. Are we going to get to have lifeguards back next winter in Boston? And our lifeguards back next winter. They've disappeared this winter. And when are we going to get a nudist beach in Bournemouth?
Well, I don't actually know the answer to the first question. I was looking in James' direction. Yes, yes, they confirmed what I thought, which is it's the RNLI rather than the council, and so I don't know the answer. I don't know whether they've made a decision on it or not. Sorry? No, the RNLI is a charity, one of the biggest charities in the country, based in Poole actually, but I don't know the answer to that because I don't think they've made a decision. And you want to know when we're getting a news speech? I have a feeling we're probably not going to get one. But I do believe, from what I know, but I believe they have a very good one over at Sutherland. And I know you've got to get there, but it's beautiful scenery, and you can then look back onto Bournemouth from that beach. So you've got the best of both worlds here.
Okay, there's another one. Is Bournemouth Council considering a shared space scheme at the other end of Boscombe pedestrian precincts?
Not at the moment, no we're not. What we're trying to do is to rejuvenate Boscombe in a way that's going to be sustainable, it's going to last the test of time. Now, some parts of it are popular and some parts aren't, but that's always the case when you change things. We've got to wait to make sure it settles down, that we monitor it and make sure it's right. But I think we've probably done, for the moment, as much around streetscape as we can afford to do. We want to take breath and continue with the other priorities that I mentioned earlier. If after a couple of years more it seems appropriate, then obviously we'll put the idea forward, but we'll have to make sure it's affordable, and I don't think at the moment that's likely to be the case.
On the same subject, obviously we tackled shared space at the last forum meeting. A number of issues was raised. Over the Christmas period in December, we had a bus crash into a lamppost, and I was talking to a bus driver who didn't know who I was, but he said he said it's all right to do the bend at 10 miles an hour. I said if you go any faster than that, he seemed to think that it was maybe that they took it at 20 miles an hour. But he said that he thought 60 to 70% of the bus drivers at his company had felt their vehicles skid to some degree going around that bend, which echoed about 3 or 4 comments about large vehicles skidding on the bend. I was just wondering whether you could update us about how the concerns that were raised at the last forum, how they're being dealt with.
Well, I wasn't at the last forum, but I have been given an update on what took place earlier this afternoon. When I was talking to a chap called Ian Calrow, who's the man who actually has managed that project and Towns Travel and a number of other things for the council, he had heard this, but he hadn't, I don't think, heard it officially from the bus company. And so what they're doing is they're undertaking some tests on that road surface to see whether there's any truth in it. If there is any truth in it, of course, they will deal with it. That's an absolute assurance. But at this stage, they're undergoing tests to see whether it's the case or not.
I assume that with the forthcoming cold spell, that there will be immediate gritting of the road if it gets icy, because this is one of the major concerns people have. If we have ice, that will be an extremely dangerous bend.
I think what's fair to say, anybody who's lived in this town for a while knows that we've got a terrifically good gritting team who get straight out and keep coming back when we get a cold snap. And if we're due one now, it'll be no different from any other. They've stockpiled all the stuff they need, they've got the equipment that's required, and they'll be straight out on the job.
I assume that the whole shared space, these issues are a priority, and that we're not going to, that they're going to be tackled as quickly as possible, because we want to see serious.
Well, it's what the bus companies call main road. Right, so the road from Christchurch Street to Poole, and it is what they call main road, and that's obviously the priority road, I guess, in this part of the conurbation. So I think the answer is pretty certain to be yes.
Okay, thank you. Take a question from the back here. Same one here.
Councillor Beesley, you don't know me. I'm an ex-Bournemouth Council employee. I was a technical inspector for West Town, looking after 3,000 properties. So I think I have a little bit more information than you think some of the people here. Right, I appreciate you coming along, but sometimes I get the impression that people that visit Boscombe think that we're all hillbillies and that we are gullible and we take whatever's told to us. Number one, you're the top of the tree, and you do take the crap, I understand that. What you need to do is go into your office tomorrow morning and call your highways team into your office and tell them why me, a former highways engineer and health and safety inspector, had to report Bournemouth Council to the Health and Safety Executive, Department for Transport and Highways England at 9 o'clock this morning for several violations in the Bournemouth area, including Lansdowne Road, for violations under Chapter 8 of the Highways Act. Okay? And get your guys to go down to the shared space And what you're saying to these people here today, you're misinformed. Do you know about the CDM regulations? No, simple question. Do you know about the CDM regulations?
Clearly I don't.
Right, CDM stands for Construction and Design Management.
Yes.
Their law.
I don't understand.
Right. Their law under the Health and Safety Executive, and violations of them carry prison sentences. The first person to be injured or killed on the shared space, Bournemouth Council could be facing a manslaughter suit against them. The road surface is not just the road surface. The speed for a shared area is maximum 10 miles an hour. I've got over 300 photographs I've been taking for the past 6 months of the area where you put signs up, taking them down. A couple of days ago, you had a team out there putting white lines around the top of the curb. The reason you're doing that is because you've got several lawsuits coming up where people have tripped, broken ankles and injured themselves and are taking Bournemouth Council to court. Under CDM regulations, you will be prosecuted for that. You need to go to your highways team, so when I phone them, and instead of them turning up, phone the contractor to warn them they've had a complaint against them, that's unprofessional. When people at this forum have been complaining about cars parked on pavements and blocking pavements, and your highways team say they're quite happy that at least it keeps cars off the road and lets other vehicles down there, that's unprofessional. Okay? Your guys need to be able to do their job properly. It's not your fault, that's why you've delegated the job. But please, go down there, look at the reports and find out why they've not been doing their job.
Well, can I say thank you for those comments? Let's be very clear. Let's be very clear. I'm the leader of the council, I'm not the chief executive. And there's a big difference between being an elected member and the responsibilities that carries and the responsibilities borne by the head of paid service and the chief executive of the council. So, in terms of the work that you've been doing today and whatever technical complaints that you've been making, not only about the regulations, but about the other issues you've raised, are ones that need to be expressed through the chief executive. You can either do that by sending it to me and I will pass it to the chief executive, or you can do it directly to Tony Williams himself. I'm sure that it will be dealt with in the way that you'd expect any local authority to go about it. I can't respond though on the technical issues, I'm not qualified to do so. I'm not a highways engineer. My background, my technical interest and expertise lies elsewhere, and it isn't in highways, and you wouldn't expect it to be. Clearly yours is, and you can talk the language of those people much more effectively than I can answer you. So I don't want to be diverted into a technical discussion because I can't answer you. But certainly, if you feel that you need to do that representation to the chief executive through me, feel free to do so. If not, do it directly. The point I would make, though, about engagement locally, and I think you used the word hillbillies, was that right? I find that almost offensive because you got here tonight 5 of the 6 Boscombe councillors, and I have not come across more assiduous members than you have across the 2 Boscombe wards, more engaged in local issues and understanding the priorities than you've got here this evening. And this isn't something that's sudden or recent. Those members who are here, one of them is new, but the rest of them have been in post for a considerable length of time, and are the people who have got behind Boscombe and the regeneration that we have undertaken. It is largely down to them that they have persuaded me and our colleagues that Boscombe should be the priority that it is. And that is why, when I became leader, final point, I appointed Jane Kelly to the Cabinet specifically around regeneration in Boscombe. And that is my commitment to Boscombe. And there are plenty of people who want to find fault with that. I know that there are many here tonight who do. And my commitment wasn't just for them, it's for now and it's for the future. And if there's a technical issue, I can't answer it because I'm not qualified to do so. But as I've said, I I will take it forward, or you can do it to the Chief Executive.
Thank you very much, Alan. The only thing is, what people don't realise, under CDO regulations, when you hand a contract or a project out to another company, the council are still responsible as a client. But one of the reasons I say about being a hillbilly, if you go down to Horseshoe Common, if you go down to Richmond Hill, all the materials and all the design laid out were all brand new. When you came to Boscombe, 90% of the works, except for the small shared area, was all recycled and is already starting to decay and started to subside. I had a serious assault just down by the Crescent in April last year to find out that the camera that is on the corner that should be looking at the gardens there to stop drug dealing is out of action. Also, when you walk down there, which you can do tonight, you will find the street lights don't have any bulbs in them because they're out of action. So any young women or any drug dealing can go on there and sorts and go on and nothing else. That's what I'm saying. And the people that pick up the pieces when things go wrong on your projects are the police and the emergency services. You need to make sure you do your designs properly and make sure they're carried out fully and not hit and miss and trial and error, which you seem to be doing on the shared space. And not only that, Kiers, who are the parent company of Michelle, who are your consultants on that job, I work alongside them. I brought it to their attention. They're going to be sending something down because their reputation could be at risk. I bring it to your attention because nobody from your council bothered returning a phone call.
Well, you obviously contact me because I've done all my phone calls. Just so that I know when I hear about this later, I didn't hear your name, sir.
My name's Edward O'Brien. I currently design roads and buildings for the Ministry of Defence.
Right, Mr. O'Brien. Okay, well, I've got that locked in my mind.
Okay, we're coming to the end of the meeting. One last question was, it was quite a long question, but it was, I think as a committee we've had the answer through the communications framework, but people may wish to know. The Argos building, which is now called the Cosmic Exchange, I'm not sure if it actually was a Cosmic Exchange.
I understand that that was its historic name long before it became Argos, so I don't remember. But that's why it's been renamed the Cosmic Exchange.
Well, there was questions about, can you confirm what the total cost of the office is? I think perhaps because this is quite a long-winded question and we are at 9 o'clock, so perhaps maybe you could give us an answer to that, which we could put on our website.
Yes, I can, but what I can tell you briefly is that it's taken us a long time to get where we are. It's a facility that we share with the police and with the regeneration team and with youth. The total cost, the total investment by the council is just over £1 million. I think 1,165,000 from memory. We have a head lease on there, not a long leasehold interest of 999 years, and then obviously sublet out of that. The council took on the project because it wanted to be right in the heart of that part of Boscombe, and I think it was the right thing to do. The landlords are Clark and Brassington, and we've been negotiating, and it's taken somewhat longer than I would have liked, but a lot of property deals do. And I think we now have a situation now that's open, where we have a facility that over time we will probably wonder how we managed without it before. It's one of those, and it's brought together those services, all of which in the centre of Boscombe were in considerable jeopardy. And so that's been a really major plus, I think, for Boscombe in general, but has put to good use, good public use, a building in the right way that was actually had been laying dormant now for quite a considerable time. So I'm pleased with that outcome, and it's yet another example of the investment that the council and the police and others are making in Boscombe.
Thank you. If you could maybe give us a fuller answer for the questions that were submitted, just because there were technical ones that we could put on the website.
Yes,
I'll
ask Kelly, I think, to do the technical stuff of forwarding it to you. IT isn't my speciality. And then you can put all of the answers onto the website. Hopefully they will coincide with what I've said.
Is there any pressing questions? Just to finish it off the last.
I'm sorry, just to come back to your top exchange or whatever it's called, it wasn't about. The toilets can't go in there, can they? Well, they can go into the regeneration if they press the bell. But as far as police, if you want police, you've got to do 101 or 909 if it's really urgent. The public can't go in there. It's a hazard.
How on a day, 4 days a week?
We did say at the last forum that if you wanted to report anything to the police, won't go to formal or find 101. They want the sort of place where you can go in.
I think they said that it was where the police officers will start their shifts from, and it's a base for the.
It's not the response base to the central. But the whole idea of it was to put everyone in the same building. The police resources and such cannot be open all the time. And actually reporting crime, to take a police officer to the streets to report crimes that people haven't got enough police officers.
Well, you're also closing, aren't you, the police station in Kings Park?
Gloucester Road.
Gloucester Road.
It's not being closed.
Oh.
No, it's being used for
No, they did say at the last forum.
Yeah, it's not going to be. I mean, it has to have a front office council vision for 2 to 3 years. About 3 years. But Gloucester Road is not shutting off, I'm saying it's being used by the police. It's not going to have it.
But is it Gloucester Road?
No.
Oh.
Police personnel in it.
Okay, thank you, Martin. So just one last question.
I want to end with a positive. I believe Gloucester Road is going to be interesting to support the Staffordshire Police. I'm really pleased to hear that that is happening. And we have a little cafe around the corner here, the Little Rose Cafe, English Cafe. And I would like to know if the council could do some recommendation for them, some congratulation for them, because they are a big centre for people who want a decent meal. That until 3 o'clock every day, the lady peels the potatoes that night before, you have a really good roast dinner with lots of fresh vegetables. It's really good for about £4, £4 or £5. I don't know if the council can do a little card to her to say you're doing a great job, because they're feeding a lot of poor people really well.
Okay. On that note.
Thank you very much for that. I think the best people to do that actually are the local ward councillors. It's on their patch, and they probably know the people concerned anyway. So can I leave that with ward councillors, and sure I'll be happy to do it. But thank you for the comment.
Okay, I must thank Leader of the Council, John Beesley, for his time, and thank you all for coming, and I've got some more down. Forum is in March. I don't know the exact date, it's on the website. Thank you. Bye-bye.